What is up, awesome people of the internet? Guys, will we end up seeing a players' union for women's college basketball? Well, possibly if a group of 120 Big Ten and SEC women's basketball players get their way. For months, a group of current college women's basketball players have been working behind the scenes trying to establish a formal advocacy group uniting under the name the United College Athletes Association, or UCAA, which is what I will be referring to in the rest of this video. So their goal is to have a voice in the rapidly changing landscape of college sports. It's been changing a lot. Specifically, they want to talk about athlete compensation, health protections, and overall equity for women's basketball players. Last month, 120 current players in the Big Ten and the SEC, two of the richest and most powerful conferences in college athletics, they sent letters requesting a formal meeting with their respective commissioners. They wanted a seat at the table to discuss how the new business model of college athletics, how it would affect them, right? But both conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten, declined. Instead, the SEC pointed the students to their internal Students Athletic Leadership Council, and the Big Ten was like, "Hey, y'all need to communicate with y'all coaches and athletics departments if y'all want to see some changes. Talk to them and see if some changes will happen." So the conferences, they could do that because the UCAA is not organized as a union. So conferences do not have a legal obligation to actually listen to them. If they were a union, conferences would have to, but they are not. So that's why they can be like, "Hey, we have other avenues for student athletes to say whatever they want to say. Go do those and leave us alone." So, of course, the response did not sit well with the players who, rightfully pointed out that, hey, their coaches do not have the power to negotiate revenue sharing deals or influence to influence NCAA-wide policies. Their coaches can't do that, right? USC's Dominique Darius and Oklahoma's Reagan Beers are both leading the player efforts for both the Big Ten and the SEC, respectively. They talked about this and they emphasized that, hey, the key issue was not just compensation. They want a legitimate voice in decisions that impact their daily lives as women's college basketball athletes. Dominique Darius said that my issue with this is that my coach does not have the power to negotiate on revenue sharing. For example, the whole institution with the whole institution of the NCAA. So telling us to talk to our coaches is just a misdirect of like, okay, just go ahead and go over there while we make all this money, and you sit over there and try to get ran in circles by your coach, thinking that's productive when it's really not. And I think that's scary because they are trying to say that we are not valued. And Reagan Beers, she spoke up as well and said, obviously there are a lot of issues we could address: safety, academics, compensation, all these things. But in the end, it comes down to what that we just want to have a voice. We don't have that right now. That's the first step. And these things can be addressed when that happens. Okay, so the current 120 players, they were snubbed, right? So WNBA players and former NCAA players are stepping in to support them and try to use their name to kind of help these students out. So this week, a letter from the UCAA's Women's College Basketball Alumni Advisory Board that was signed by over 20 former NCAA athletes, which includes Elizabeth Williams, who is the chair of this alumni advisory, Sylvia Fowles, Layshia Clarendon, Jantel Lavender, Jordan Canada, Bridget Carlton, Megan Gustafson, Destiny Slocum, Veronica Burton, Rebecca Gardner, and the list goes on. Anyway, lots of players who are involved in this thing, and they were like, hey, like, Like we want to demand that the Big Ten and the SEC actually take these athletes serious and actually meet with them. And these players, they understand. They were in the NCAA before. They understand firsthand how things work, right? They lived through the challenges of being undervalued and underrepresented in the NCAA, and how they really do want to ensure that the next generation has a say in their future. Elizabeth Williams, as I said, she is the advisory board chair, and is also very, very involved in the WNBA union, Players Association union. She envisions a structure that is similar to the WNBA's union, where player representatives negotiate with the leagues on behalf of athletes. And guys, we'll ultimately see if that happens. I don't know. We'll see. But the push for better conditions goes beyond just money. Players are also demanding health protections, addressing medical negligence concerns. They are seeking regulations on excessive travel due to conference realignment. We all know that the SEC and Big Ten has dramatically changed over the last year, and we're seeing teams in California having to regularly travel to the Midwest, to the East Coast, to end up playing conference games, which is a lot on players, especially considering these players are still students. Again, student athletes. And so these players are trying to have a say in some of this excessive travel that is happening, and making sure that there are regulations in terms of how often teams are needing to travel cross country, and how that affects their schooling, and how that affects just a whole bunch of stuff. There overall is a lack of transparency when it comes to revenue sharing, and that's another major issue that these players are looking to address. Schools are poised to distribute new funds, and a lot of the funds, overwhelmingly, understandably, are going to men's sports, right? Right. When we look at Georgia, where Georgia football, they are expected to receive, they expect to receive 75% of their $20.5 million pool, whereas women's basketball gets about 5%. The reality is that college athletics, particularly women's basketball, has been evolving dramatically over the last few years. You got NIL deals, conference realignment, the growing popularity of the women's game. It's clear that these players are more valuable now than ever. And with the increased value comes the right to, try to get a piece of the pie and have a say in how their sport is ultimately run. So, what happens next? Well, right now, the Big Ten and the SEC are trying to avoid this conversation completely, because they don't have to actually have this conversation. But I believe that they will not be able to ignore this much longer. The pressure is mounting, and the UCAA has already made some waves with WNBA players publicly backing them. The conversation is not going away. Guys, and if the Big Ten and the SEC are not careful, we're ultimately going to see something that they really don't want, which is that they're pushing these players to get closer and closer to forming an actual union down the line. This is something that no conference wants. No conference wants student athletes to actually form a union, because it'll just make their lives more of a nightmare, right? The conference brass, right? And the longer that they go not speaking to these athletes who are right now not in the union, you are going to force their hand to be like, the only way you will listen to us is if we form a union, so we're going to form a union. So I think ultimately it's in the SEC and the Big Ten's best interest to actually start to have these conversations, and allow these athletes to feel like they're at least being heard. Whether or not you do what they want you to do is a different thing, but by refusing to meet with them, you're basically not even allowing them to have any say at all. College sports are changing, whether conferences like it or not. And as history has shown, when players band together and demand better treatment, the institutions making billions off of them will eventually have to listen. Now, guys, that is the story. What do y'all think about what is happening with women's college basketball right now? I know that there's not really anybody really talking about this, and I wanted to make a video just to give you all some information, because I think this is very, very important. And I'm really interested to ultimately see how this continues to go. These players, they're serious, man. The SEC and the Big Ten, that's where it's at when it comes to women's basketball. And for 120 players to band together and be like, you know what? Yes, we want to see something different. Guys, we're demanding something different. We're demanding a seat at the table where we can at least share with you all our thoughts instead of having to go through our coach or our local student athlete group, right? Or the administration at our school, because that's clearly not working. And they're like, hey, you know what? We need something better. We actually want to have a seat at the table with the commissioner and actually tell y'all what we think. Ultimately, I think they're gonna have to do something. They're gonna have to do something. But what do y'all think? Let me know in the comments below. If y'all appreciated learning about something that I guarantee you most of y'all did not know was even happening, let me know by hitting that like button and hit that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments what you think about this. If y'all want to hear more news, like real news, not just like random, drama or whatever that's happening, let me know, because I love to cover stuff like this. I think it's very fun to do deep dives and like really figure out what is going on and figure out a way to succinctly tell it to you all. So let me know what y'all think, and I will see y'all in the next one. Until next time, guys, bye bye.